Hello, welcome. It's Pauline again from PQW, and I've got a wonderful project to show you. I'm going to show you how I've strip pieced these blocks directly onto the backing and the wadding, or the batting as some people call it. So we're quilting as we go by sewing and flipping, and then I'm going to show you how I've joined the blocks together with one of my quilt-as-you-go techniques, but we're going to learn how to do stars in the sashing. Because when we do a quilt-as-you-go and apply a sashing, we have to approach it so differently to when we join a whole quilt top together. So I want to take you through step by step in this lesson, and this could be a whole big quilt, which I'll show you a big quilt finished at the end. But this is a three-part lesson. So we're going to start. You can see I've got the backing on here, everything's on there, and we're ready to go. But to start with, I'll take you over the products that I've used and how I've selected my fabrics. So we'll pull all of this in. Now, the fabrics. We'll start with those first up. I've chosen this blue fabric as my backing because I had plenty of it in the cupboard, and I know I've got enough to make a whole quilt back out of it. And even if you want to do your backing in all different colours, it would look absolutely fabulous, which is a great way to use up your stash. Then I've chosen this striped fabric for the centre of my star. I want it to pop out a bit, so that's what I've chosen. You might like something different. And then I've chosen 2, 4, 6, 7 black and white fat quarters, and they're going to be used in the strips. And then I've chosen some really nice bright colours here, and we've got 5 colours there, which is just going to make the black and whites pop. You might like to set your own colour theme. You might like all florals. You might like to use spots and stripes. Any combination is going to work for this fabulous scrappy quilt. So what we've done, once we've selected the fabrics, these are the tools that I've used to construct this and what I will use to construct a whole big quilt. The blocks are all going to be cut out 12 inches. So I'm using the 12.5-inch square ruler. This one's still got the protective coating on the back, but I normally peel that off. We've got the grippy side that's going to go down onto the fabric to stop any movement. So that's what I'm using to cut out everything. Then I use the Hobbs Heirloom double-sided fusible wadding. Now, I really emphasise this because it's what's going to hold everything into place. We won't use a pin. We don't have to use a walking foot. We'll get no distortion. We'll get no stretching. If you use other waddings, you'll have to approach it totally different to the way I'm going to do it. So you'd have to figure that out if you choose to use a different style of wadding. When we start putting the quilt together, we're going to use the 3-inch piece sashing templates. Now this is important because remember, when we do our sashings for Quilters-you-go, we have to allow for turnbacks. So we're going to use the square, this big square, and we're going to use this rectangle. That's going to make the stars. And all the turnbacks are allowed in the template because it's a very unusual measurement that we work with. We're going to use the 3-inch sasher tool to make the sashings after we've put the star points on. And then when I've quilted, I've used a set M quilting templates. Now I've chosen to use this little rope style of design, but there's another nice one on the back. You might prefer to use that one. You might prefer to use something else. When I put the design on to do the quilting, of course, you all know I love the Pauline fabric marking pencil. This is what I've used to mark my quilting design. So that's basically the tools. I do use the monopoly invisible thread in the bobbin through the whole sewing process. It's in my bobbin all the way through the making of this quilt. I like to use a good quality fabric thread on the top where I've used a rasant. I've used a grey rasant thread. It's a good stable thread for piecing. And then when I've quilted the sashings through here, I've used the Wonderful Deco Bulb in my top. Now you can still see the grey marks where I've marked with the pencil because I haven't yet washed this because it's going to become a whole big quilt. It's a piece of a whole big quilt. So once the quilt's completed, I will wash it completely and that pen will wash out. So let's get started. As I said, we're going to cut out 12-inch squares of our backing and our wadding. So I've already got those cut out. So we can see there, I've used the square, I've cut that out. I've then got the backing, wrong side up to me, the batting on top of it. Then we're just going to, with a hot dry iron, on your normal ironing surface, just put the wadding side down onto the table, onto the ironing surface, and with your hot dry iron, just slowly press. Now, it's not going to clog up your ironing board cover, but if you're a little bit worried, put a little bit of baking paper down. You know, the paper you use when you're baking, so things don't stick. But see, it's not sticking to my ironing surface. But you choose if you want to put something down so you're not going to wreck your ironing board, but I've never wrecked mine. It's never ever stuck to my ironing board cover. So I'm just slowly going to press this. Now, because it's fusible on both sides, I need to let the iron just slowly move over it because we've got to let the fuse be activated by the heat. If I'm going to iron fast, it won't work. So just go nice and slow. Run it all the way over. You know, it's hard to cut your wadding straight, so if it's a little bit off, it doesn't matter because we're going to trim the blocks back once we've done all the sewing on the blocks. So I think that's now adhered. Oh no, I need a little bit more. Okay, so now you can see there's nothing on my ironing surface. We're going to put the wadding side up to us. Now we're going to cut strips of fabric, and I've got mine already cut, but just to let you know, you're going to, from your darks and lights, just pull these ones over, from your darks and light fat quarters, lay your fat quarters out, just get them all nice and straight, maybe press them first, lay them all out, and I usually fold again, but you fold as many times as you like. Now, out of our darks and lights, I'm going to get you to cut 3 strips 2.5 inches wide and 3 strips 2 inches wide. So cut them all up into strips. Don't cut it all up because we're going to need to have a chunk left at the end for when we put our end triangles on, and we'll use part of this to do that. So cut those apart into your strips, and I've got a lot of mine cut here ready. So I've got some 2.5 and some 2-inch strips. It's really just random. These could all be different colours. You don't need to have a colour theme if you don't want, like I have. Then out of my brights, I've cut strips of fabric. I've cut 3 strips 1.5 inches wide and 3 strips 1 inch wide. So now we've got 2.5, 2, 1.5 and 1 inch strips of fabric cut ready to go. The first thing I do is choose whichever fabric I want to start with. Oh, that one's not a very nice straight strip. We'll keep that for later. You can see I've been using scraps of fabric. We're just going to, oh, there's another one. Been cutting chunks out of them. We're just going to lay a piece of fabric down. Let's come over this way. Piece of fabric down. You can start wherever. If you really want to get your strips running straight, lay a piece from point to point. You could even, with your ruler, put your ruler down. This is why I like this big ruler. We could use the 45-degree angle of our ruler. It's laying down on this side of the fabric. Then with our fabric marking pencil, we just get this lined up. You could draw a line so that you can keep everything straight. Then bring it down, line up this edge. So we're going from point to point using the 45-degree angle. Now I'll see if I've got a nice long strip here. All my strips are very, very short. Let's start with one of these. So if you want to get it all accurate, I'm lining the edge of this orange fabric up on that line I've just drawn. Then with my hot iron, I'm just slowly going to press. Just keep it all lined up. If you iron it down and you haven't got it right, you can pull it back and re-iron it. So that holds that in place. Now we'll put our next colour on top of this, like so. And then with a 1/4 inch seam, we're going to sew all the way through all layers. Now this is where I'll have the mono poly thread in my bobbin. And because I've got a multicoloured back, the blues and the white, I didn't want to use a blue thread because it would show up on the white. And I didn't want to use white because it would show up on the blue. So using the clear mono poly thread in the bobbin lets it blend in with everything. So we're going to put this down or stitch. You can pin it, but I find that that batting just holds everything in place beautifully for it. And then we're going to sew our 1/4 inch all the way down here. We're then going to turn that over. Oh, that just fitted nicely. We will press that one. Press it nicely once you've stitched it. And then we're going to apply our next piece of fabric. Now you might like to come back and add a colour here. Lay it down. Just line up your edges. You're now going to stitch down here by machine. Once you've stitched down there, you're going to fold it back. And you're just going to keep working through, stitching all of your strips on until you get to the outside edge. As you can see here, I've got all of these strips on. Now we have to put a triangle on. So this is where you're going to cut a piece of one of your fabrics. I've cut this 7.5 inches. And once we've done that, we're going to cut this in half on the diagonal. So it will be cut in half. Then we're just going to put it face down onto the last strip. We're going to stitch across here, fold it back, press it, and there's our block finished. And then we're going to trim that up. So I'm going to set the machine up and do a little bit of sewing for you so you can see what I mean by all of this, and then I'll cut the triangle just so you can see exactly the steps that I take. And once you've done your 4 blocks, it's very simple to join it together, and then the quilting is the easy part. So let's go to the sewing machine and start the sewing process. Okay, so now we've got the sewing machine set up. But I just want to show you, this is the clear thread that I was talking about, the mono poly invisible thread. That's what I've got on the bobbin, and I've got a grey resent on the top of my machine. We've ironed the first strip on. Now we've got the next strip to come across. And we're now going to go to the machine and sew our 1/4 inch seam all the way down here. Now I'm using an open toe foot. The foot that I use to virtually make all of my quilts. It's what I piece with, it's what I quilt with, it's what I put my bindings on with, and I use my needle position. So when I put this underneath the foot of the machine and I put my pressure foot down, I'm going to move my needle position over to be 1/4 inch. I know the setting on my machine. I have to move it over 5 steps. You check with your machine how many steps you'd have to move it over to get your exact 1/4 inch. But if you don't do that, if you don't want to use an open toe foot, use your 1/4 inch foot. It's up to you what you prefer to use. So we don't have to pin it. All we're going to do now is stitch along that line. Now you may have noticed that I have the sew slip mat on the bed of my machine. I love these mats because it allows everything just to glide through for me. I don't have to push anything. the feed dogs are working the fabric through and the mat is allowing the fabric just to slide, so I don't have to put both hands on and be really stressed with the way I do things. Leave that mat on your machine permanently, but make sure you get the mat that has the cutout for your feed dogs to work up. We've got them on our website, so do look at them, because they are a brilliant bit of equipment to take all the pressure off you. So we're coming to the end now. No need to reverse or anything. I'm just going to cut my thread. And now, oops, that didn't cut properly. So now we'll go over, and I've got a pressing mat on my work table, but you'd probably need to use your ironing board. Push this over out nice so you get a nice crisp seam. Run your fingers along here, then just grab your iron and press. Just press that seam out. Now as you're pressing, it's going to start to adhere to that fusible batting, which makes it so much easier. If I wasn't using that batting, I'd have to have a walking foot on, I'd have to be pinning, I'd have to be doing all sorts of things. So now we're ready for the next strip. Choose your colour. I'm going to choose to put a light colour on this reverse side of the orange. Just get my fabric with the wrong side down. Sorry, the right side down, wrong side facing up. Lay that there. Go back to your machine and sew down that side. So we'll just line all of this up. Line it up so the edges are equal. And then we just start stitching. And you're just going to follow that procedure all the way through till you get all the strips, till you fill out the block. Except you're going to stop shy of the corner because we're going to put a triangle on the corner. It just gives it that little bit of dimension. You could strip piece right to the corner, but I like to have the triangles on the edge. Otherwise you've got to do a lot of little strips towards the end. So it's very fast, so we're really quilting each strip as we go. You could come back and do some quilting over the top of these blocks if you wanted to, but it's not necessary because you're actually putting a lot of stitching into each one of these strips. Okay. So back to the ironing surface. Once again, finger press it out so you get that seam nice and crisp. And with the iron, just press. And you can see I've got it all set up on my work table, so I'm not up and down to the ironing surface or anything like that. Just have your little iron alongside you. So that's the procedure. I usually come around and cut off these ends just with scissors, just make that a rough cut, because later on we will cut this back to square it up. You'll find that if you use this wadding that I recommend, you're not going to lose a lot in too much pull in. So now what we're going to do next is I'm going to cut that square on the diagonal and add it to this block I've got completed here. So I've got this block all but completed, just got to put that corner bit on. So I'll bring my 3-in-1 workboard over, because I love these right next to my sewing machine. Grab your square, put your 45-degree angle of the ruler, this 45-degree angle, hope you can see that. Put that alongside the edge of that fabric square, lining it up, grab your cutter and cut. So now we have 2 triangles. Come back to your block, put this face down, make sure it's going to come out and cover for you. Okay, lay that down, back to your machine, And we'll just sew that on. It's very, very simple. You could sit at your machine and make so many blocks in a day. Like if you want to make a queen size quilt, just sit and use up all your scraps and piece exactly like this. It is a method of quilt-as-you-go that's been around for a very long time. It's nothing new, but it's just a great way of using up everything you have in your stash. Okay, so that is the blocks completed. Make as many if you want. I'm just going to work with 4 so that I can show you how to join them together, but I'll show you at the end another quilt I've made using the same technique. And I love doing it because it really gives you a wonderful result. So now the next step that we need to take is put this out on our cutting board, and we're going to square this off. So all we're going to do, and I'd leave this till you get all your blocks done, because if some have pulled in a bit more than others, or if something's gone wrong, you need to find the smallest one and then square them back to that. So I'm going to square these back. I'll trim up this side, around here, turn it around and do the other side. I'll do all the blocks the same, and then get ready for the next episode, because we're going to start making those sashings and joining the blocks together. So we'll see you very soon. Bye.